Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rick Mast Show. I am Charlie Marlow. That is the great Rick Mast. Rick, we've been texting, tweeting, all that. It is great to see your lovely face once again. How are you, sir?
Doing good. I'm doing good, Charlie. Just getting over the weekend of racing, man. Trying to cipher everything that went on and watching everybody's social posts and the media and figuring out what the complaint is this week. So, what are you seeing as the complaints? I know what I'm seeing. What are you seeing?
Well, the biggest complaint, obviously, is was this race boring? We'll get to the Samantha Busch tweet, but I'll start there with you. So, Kyle Larson just dominates this race essentially from start to finish. And no matter how you call it, I saw an ass whopping, ass whipping, ass whooping, whatever it was. Kyle
Whooping.
Larson dominates. But in your mind, what was it? A fun race?
Yeah.
Was it typical Bristol, or was it kind of boring?
Well, if you throw Kyle Larson out of it, right? I didn't think it was too bad. I mean, if you look back, I mean, the cameras were on all these guys racing for everything, and it was all about the points mostly. But from Kyle, if you just take Kyle Larson out of the equation, it wasn't that bad a race. It really wasn't. But Kyle Larson, I mean, again, as I said on X, it was an ass whooping. That's not whipping or whopping, it's whooping, ass whooping. Every now and then, you'll have a guy at a team that hits on something, especially with this car. Well, hell, not with this car, with every car. It's always been like that. Somebody every now and then will hit on something that just dominates, man, and nobody can run with them. And that's what happened with the 5 car. Uh, and you got to give them their due in that. When something like that happens, man, I just sit back and salute them, because it's very, very hard to come up with something that makes your car that dominant in today's world, especially with this race car, as finite as these cars are. It's hard to do that. So the racer in me appreciated that part, right? So that took some of the boringness out of it for me watching Kyle Larson. But back through the field, dude, I mean, those guys were all, and the TV did a good job. I'll have to give those guys credit. One of the better jobs, I thought, of television this year, of keeping up with what was going on with the points and who was racing for the points deal throughout the whole race. And no, to me, it was just an interesting race. Yeah, throw out Kyle Larson, man. He stuck it up. He stuck it up.
Okay, let's get right to what everybody's talking about, mostly Sunday, and that is the Samantha Busch tweet. I'll read it for you here. I'll put it on the screen for everybody. She says, "Not just saying this because we didn't run well, but can we all agree the only exciting part of the race was watching Owen celebrate with Kyle? Obviously, Kyle Larson's son, Owen. Can't remember a Bristol race being that blah in long time. Time to cancel this race car." What do you think of that fiery tweet, Rick Mast?
Well, I take that statement a little deeper, right? What I take from that statement is she's listening to other folks. She's listening to her husband. Yeah, her husband's not doing good right now with the car, and some other guys are not particularly doing particularly well with this car. But to me, it's like, she's echoing maybe what a lot of the drivers are echoing to each other in the motorhome lot, right? A lot of stuff for fans, a lot of stuff goes on in the motorhome lot during the week between the drivers and the wives. I mean, the driver will come in and he'll be bitching about the car, bitching about this, and then the wife has to listen to it. And then the wife has her little tea or lunch with other drivers, a group of drivers' wives, and they're all sitting around talking, and they'll relate what their husband's frustrations are. Okay, and first thing you know, you've got a theme going on, yeah, in the motorhome lot with the drivers and the drivers' wives, and I really taking this like this is a theme that's going on in the drivers' lot amongst drivers and drivers' wives. I don't know that she would just come out and say that, but just listen to Kyle and maybe the frustrations those guys are having. But the problem is we're too deep into this car. I mean, golly, man, the races have been very good at a lot of places. I mean, Richmond sucked and Martinsville sucked, and if you look at Bristol, a lot of people saying it sucked with Kyle Larson doing what he did. Although I kind of disagree a little bit, but when you hear comments like that from especially drivers' wives, man, you got to really think about. I mean, because I know I subjected my wife to this stuff for 30 years, okay, and I kind of know how this stuff gets around and how it works and the vibes with everybody. And to me, again, I think it might be just echoing what a lot of people in the garage are saying, but they can't do anything about it. They can't publicly come out and say, the race car I'm driving ain't worth a crap. NASCAR's screwed up. This car's no good. You can't do that. You have to work with what you've got. I mean, the teams really are who asked for this race car, right? They're the ones that wanted this type of racing and this type of race car. And they've continually been working on this thing since the beginning. I mean, they've made changes to it, done this, that, and other. I saw an interesting answer to that, Charlie, on the Samantha Busch thread. One guy said, it's not the car, it's the tire. It's the short sidewall tire. You can't put a rubber band on the outside of a wheel. No, what was it? You take a rubber band and put it on the outside of a wheel. That's made for road courses and other cars, not these cars on ovals, right? And I'm like, that was a pretty interesting take. Now, that's a fan that kind of knows a little bit, and he might be onto something. It could have a lot to do with the sidewall being so short on these cars. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but and everybody goes back to the same thing all the time, Charlie. More horsepower, more horsepower, more horsepower. We got to give more horsepower. NASCAR's already said, we ain't going to give you no more horsepower, right? Well, they've done everything aerodynamically they can do to that race car. There's nothing else they can do for short track racing for that race car. And, we're in an entertainment business now, man. Go back and look at some of the old races. Go back and look at a lot of the old races. We're talking about how great it was before, but, man, we didn't have 500 laps of side-by-side racing at Bristol back in the good old days, right? We had good racing. It was always good racing. If you was in your race car, you felt like you were in a Ben-Hur battle, man, with your chariot, right? Golly, bum almighty, Bristol. And it did feel like you were racing in a coliseum in those days. But, I don't know. I don't know how to quantify that. I don't know how to, I guess we'll just have to put up with it every week, listen to people fuss about it and try to make the best we can of it. But again, Bristol was crappy. Martinsville was crappy. I'm not going to go along with Bristol. I mean, Martinsville and Richmond were crappy. I'm sorry, Martinsville and Richmond were crappy. Bristol, yeah, it was crappy. Throw Kyle Lawson out, it wasn't. But anyhow, I digress here, Charlie.
Well, here's a couple things. I want to talk about the tires in a second. But in terms of just the interest of watching the race, and it was a pretty fast race in terms of
Yeah.
when it ended, I will say this. Even though it was pretty obvious how hard it was to pass, for example, lapped cars, when you have the fastest car and they're trying to pass, Martin Truex Jr., for example, he gets his speeding penalty, and it's so hard for him to pass these other cars, even though he was running up front earlier. I do think that the playoff format, especially at a cutoff race, saves NASCAR in terms of interest. Because, Rick, to me, when I'm watching that TV screen and I'm watching the left side and I see, -1, +1, Ty Gibbs, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex, you're in, you're out constantly. It's hard not to be pretty fascinated by that. So even though the race wasn't perfect in terms of guys being able to pass cars, I do think that the playoff format, especially for these cutoff races, it's fascinating to watch that screen and see who's going to make it and who won't.
Yeah, Charlie, to your point, sitting there thinking about it, excuse me, I was mesmerized sitting there the whole race watching the left side of that screen and those friggin' points, right? I mean, and they showed, and here's what was neat about the broadcast. They showed the points and where everybody was at. The right side of the screen showed those guys racing for the last cutoff. I mean, it was a good, that's what I meant a while ago when I said TV did a good job.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. And if we didn't have this points deal, all we had to watch would have been Kyle Larson's dominance and how can you do that? There was no, I mean, you talking about people think it was born the way it was Saturday night. If we didn't have this points deal, oh man, well, yeah, I know the traditionalists, everybody, a lot of those traditionalists, raise Cain about the new format all the time. They just like to fuss about it, and that's fine. If you don't like it, I mean, you're a fan and you love this sport and you loved it the way it was. You don't like it the way it is. Well, I'm telling you, we're in the new world, man. We have to, again, it's the entertainment business. We have to entertain everybody. Charlie, to your point, I just don't think we would be there. I don't think the interest would be the way it is if we didn't have this points deal. And another thing, a quick tidbit, we didn't have caution flags. You talked about how short the race was. We
Mhm.
didn't have cautions. That's the other thing about Bristol that always made it exciting. You would have a caution, man, and then that would start, and then cautions would start breeding cautions, and it would just go on and on and on all night. For whatever reasons, everybody was playing real nice with one another. It seemed like for the most part, we didn't have cautions, and that added to the stigma of a boring race because Richmond or Bristol, you can always count on cautions. So, but anyhow,
Yeah, so you mentioned tires earlier. Were you surprised that it wasn't more like the spring race where it was crazy with the fall off, where nobody expected that, but it made it a damn interesting race. It was so different. And then you could tell, so I was listening to a lot of the drivers' press conferences, mostly Friday, a little bit Saturday, and all the drivers seemed to say, look, this race is probably not going to be like the spring. From practice and qualifying and all that, it seemed like it's your typical Bristol race, and that it wasn't going to have the crazy tire fall off. Were you surprised by that? Because I thought we'd see a little more, not as drastic as the spring race, but I thought you'd see a little more there playing into the strategy, and that wasn't the case.
Charlie, I'm a student of the sport, right? So
Yes, sir.
I've kept up with this tire deal. I've tried to keep up with it. Anytime somebody they would talk about it or something I would read about it, and mostly it was a Goodyear duo, Stu, the Goodyear guy that runs the racing program. I would try to listen every time they interviewed those guys. Moody had him on a couple of times. He's on different shows, and they would always bring up during the summer. You would hear Bristol a lot. He would bring up Bristol and what went on at Bristol, and then when we get ready for the race, we're going to bring back the same tire we ran in the spring, and we don't think it's going to have the same end result as we had in the spring, right? And then I listened to some crew chiefs being interviewed, and I listened to some drivers, and every one of them, to a fault, even up to Saturday morning, I was listening to a couple of those guys. I forget who it was saying, we don't really know. We don't know. We don't know what to expect. We don't know what to expect. That, and then we get in the race, and the tire acts like a normal race tire. It doesn't act like it did in the spring. It's the same friggin' race tire. It's the same friggin' race track, right? But the tire doesn't go to crap in 30 laps. I don't know, man. I mean, this one's got me screwed up. I've got to make a couple calls. I've got to try to figure out what went on with this tire because, you know, and I was sitting there thinking, well, you guys haven't changed anything. Why is it going to be different? Why is this tire not going to come apart in 30 laps the way it did in the spring? This is going to be fun to watch. Well, hell, they run 30 laps and the guys had fallen off like, what, 6/10 of a second, 7/10 of a second a lap. And I'm like, well, hell, the tire's not doing what it did in the spring. I don't know. I don't know. This is a big question mark. Normally something like this, you've got a handle on. But when the crew chiefs on Saturday morning before the race didn't have a clue what was going to happen, then how in the hell is Rick Master and the fan going to figure out what's going to happen? We sit back and watch and see what the deal is. But it's made for an interesting deal for me. Let's put it that way.
So I'm curious, when you're watching this race, what were you most interested in seeing? So for me, it wasn't who was going to win the race. To me, when I start watching that race, it was all about, is Denny Hamlin going to advance? And I'm a Denny Hamlin fan, not just because I think he's good for business with his podcast and he challenges NASCAR with the whole charter deal. I mean, he's always keeping things interesting, but I am one of those guys. After 20 years, I want Denny Hamlin to win a championship. And even if he doesn't win a championship, if he keeps advancing and gets to the final 8, gets to the final 4, I think it's good for the sport. So what do you think about which drivers advance, which didn't? Obviously, you have what? Keselowski, Gibbs, and Harrison Burton and Martin Truex Jr. out. You have some guys. I mean, look, Chase Briscoe advances. Daniel
Right.
Suarez advances. I mean, Austin Cindric's had a good year, but you have some different names than you probably would have expected at the start of the year. So how do you feel about the guys that advanced to the top 12 and the guys that fell off?
Yeah, the one that really had my interest peaked was Martin Truex, just because the storyline with Martin, man. He's a past champion. He's over it. He's done with racing, right? It's obvious when he gets. It's obvious every week when he gets out of the car. I mean, he's not a happy camper, right? He's like, man, and knowing a racer's mentality, he wants so bad to win, right? He wanted so bad to be in that championship mix. I mean, how great is it to go out as a champion or as a winner, right? And that's what he wanted to do. And Martin Truex is a champion. He's a winner. He's a Hall of Famer in our sport. There's no doubt about that. And watching his demise, watching the speeding penalty knock him back, and then of course he can't pass anybody, right? That was one storyline I was following. Denny Hamlin being in the chase, right? Denny Hamlin needs to be in the championship battle in our sport. I mean, you're exactly right. It has to do with his brand. It has to do with the longevity of his career. It has to do with him never winning the championship. A driver that should have won a couple championships. He hasn't done it, and here we are. He's one flat tire or one speeding penalty, right? Or somebody just cross it up in front of him. He's one mistake away from not being in that championship, or in the race. And you're sitting there watching that. Whenever they show the camera on him, I'm sitting there, I'm looking at it. I'm like, man, one mistake, dude, you're out of this, and you need to be in this. And I'm like you. I'm a Denny Hamlin fan, but the thing about Denny right now, it's his brand. His brand, the Denny Hamlin brand, is so. What's the word I'm looking for, man? It's not controversial. That's not the word. That's one word, but that's not the main thing. But his brand in our sport is very important.
Intriguing.
Intriguing is one of them. Yes, his brand is very, very, very important. I think in our sport right now, and it's because what he's done. It's because of his podcast and what he says, the way he conducts himself. Right? He's got his haters. He's got his lovers, and for him to be in it, it's good. Briscoe being in. What a storyline there, man. Well, look at that team. I mean, Charlie, I can tell you, man, years and years when I was in the sport and even back before the sport and listening to stories and listening to guys, when you're half or three-quarters of the way through a season and next year that team is going to make a change, right? Whether it be, and most of the time, the big change is the driver is not going to be there next year or the owner's changing or whatever. I'm telling you right now, 90% of the time I've watched, the team folds up. All right, are you listening to me? The team quits. Whether it's the driver, the crew chief, the guys putting the thing together, the motivation's gone. They just don't want to, and it's not really something. And I've noticed this with a lot of people over the years. It's not something they purposely do. Right? They don't get up and say, "Oh, we're not going to be together next year. To hell with it." They don't really do that. It's a fire in them that just kind of glimmers down. It doesn't. That fire and that desire to do well just kind of dims down, dude, and you just don't really do what you did before. That's what to me is so intriguing about this Briscoe deal, right? The 14 and all of those guys. So some of those guys, if you believe what you say, some of the guys don't even have jobs next year yet, right? A lot of them have been placed, a lot of them have got places to go, and some of them don't. But for those guys to keep doing what they're doing, it says a lot about that team, the character of the people on that team. Because listen, man, those guys were dealt a shitty hand. There's no doubt the guys on the Stewart-Haas race team, they were dealt a shitty hand, right? But very seldom do you see guys keep that fire burning that bright to try to make it happen, and they're doing it. So to me, that's a big, big, big storyline. The Gibbs dude, we thought the way that car ran all night, it looked like he was going to start passing cars and get in. He started fading back. He's out of it, right? Burton, of course, had his power steering issues or whatever, but he was so far back, he's almost going to have to win to get in. So, I think with the guys we got left, I think it's a good mix. I wish Martin Truex had been in there, but then Suarez or somebody wouldn't have been in there, and that was a good storyline. He's 3 laps out. The dude's 3 laps out and battling to be in this chase deal, man. And Daniel Suarez, I'm telling you, Charlie, Daniel Suarez needs to be in our chase deal. Daniel Suarez, for the fans that's watching and loving our sport, you're watching the beginnings of a brand with Daniel Suarez. He's got his act together. He's got his stuff together mentally, right? He knows. I don't know who taught him. I don't know who's coaching him. I don't know what's going on, but that dude has his stuff together for a long-term to be a long-term superstar in our sport. It's just one of those deals. Not everybody can do that, right? He's got the talent to do it, and he's either being coached or naturally he knows what he's supposed to be doing. But you're watching a brand being built right here. You watch in 10 years, see what I'm telling you.
So Suarez right now in 10th. So he's on the bubble for the next 3 races, obviously. But you have Cindric 9th, Suarez 10th, Alex Bowman 11th, Chase Briscoe 12th. And then when you go to the top 8 right now, so Kyle Larson is leading. And also it's felt like Kyle Larson's year. There's been so much talk about him all season with the double and then all the controversy and the waiver. But then you keep going down. Christopher Bell seems to always quietly be there, year in, year out. You know, he's soft spoken and he just delivers. So he's second. Tyler Reddick third. William Byron, another guy who I feel like he always starts the season pretty hot, winning races, goes in a little bit of a slump. He's right there in fourth. You got Blaney, Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott in seventh, Logano eighth. Chase Elliott, for being the most popular driver for a million years, he's also quietly like every time I watch a race, I'm like, this just feels like one of those weird years where Chase Elliott is going to quietly just get in there and then win it all.
Yeah. He's interesting. Okay. And I spoke with Chase somewhere early this year. I forget somewhere we're at. And I spoke with Chase. We're talking about this car, and he was talking about, and I've heard this from other guys a little bit, probably not as much in depth as I heard from Chase, but this car requires a little bit different mindset, the way they drive the car. Okay. The way the car does, the way it acts and reacts. And he related that last year or whatever, when they first come out, that he fought that, right? He fought trying to do what this car was actually wanting, or the way it was needed to be driven and set up. And he was still in the mode of the older car and doing it that way. He said, he just said to hell with it. And all right, I'm going to give in and we'll start doing with this car, driving this car the way it has to be driven, or whatever you got to do, right? And he started doing that, and he started getting better again. I mean, if you remember, he broke his leg, and he was out for a few months or whatever, and he came back, and everybody put it on. He was out, had been out of the car, lost his rhythm and all that. Just it takes time to get back. Well, I never bought into that. I thought, no, there's something else going on. And when he explained to me about the car and the way you got to drive it and different things, that it made sense to me. So I think this whole season, this year has been a learning process for Chase, figuring out what he's got to do to drive this particular car and how it's got to be set up. And it's never been flashy with Chase this year. You look up there and he's sitting there running 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th all day long. And then all of a sudden, man, you look up there in the racing areas in the top 5. They'll have a caution. They'll have a pit stop. He'll be 7th. They'll have a pit stop and 10 to go. There he's running 3rd. You're like, well, where the hell did he come from, right? They've been real sneaky with that. I mean, you're exactly right in your observation, Charlie, about him, and but again, we got all this mix, all these guys. Charlie, I'm gonna say this, and a lot of people don't like hearing this, but to me, the whole battle is getting to Phoenix, right? Once we get to Phoenix, it's whoever's got the best setup that day. And if you look back last couple of years, if we get to Phoenix and the Penske cars are in the race, that's who I'm going to pull for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's who I'm going to put my money on. It's one of the Penske cars, just because they have a good setup for that racetrack last couple of years. So, it's going to be interesting the next couple of races watching this.
Yeah, speaking of those Penske cars, you got Blaney in 5th, Logano 8th, Cindric 9th. And when you look at the top 12, manufacturer-wise, think about the storyline early.
Yeah.
Ford couldn't win a thing, right? And you got 4 Fords, you're including Briscoe, you got 3 Toyotas, and you got 5 Chevys. So pretty even across the board, and good on Ford for figuring it out after a rough start.
Let me tell you how weird I am, Charlie. I'll be watching the race, man, and they'll show qualifying, or the race is starting to have qualifying, or during the race, I'm watching the race and I'm looking at the top 10 rundown. And then when the race is over, I'm looking at who finished where. And you know what I'm thinking of is Bill France Jr. I'm thinking of Billy France Jr. You know why? I'm sitting there counting the manufacturers. I'm like, all right, first is for top 5. There's 2 Fords, there's a Toyota, there's Chevrolet, right? Billy's happy. right?
Mhm.
Or sometime I'll see top 6 or Toyotas or whatever. I'm like, Bill France Jr. is not happy right now. That was one of his deals, man. He wanted the manufacturers, he wanted parity across the board with these manufacturers. He hated, and we've talked about this on this show before. He hated for one manufacturer to have a dominant deal over the others. He would change the rule. He would change stuff. I mean, I lived that. I mean, he would come down and like, all right, guys, this ain't happening. You're not gonna muddy up my sport. We're gonna cut the spoiler off your car. I mean, I watched this happen, and I don't know. Isn't that weird that I would look at the right now in 2024? I'd look at a rundown and think Billy France would be happy. How is that sick or is that weird? What is that, Charlie? I don't get
No,
that.
that's just hey, you're old school.
I
I
guess.
like it.
I guess. I don't know, man. I don't know.
No, so speaking of manufacturers, but then also teams, it just the last couple years, it's been such about Hendrick, Gibbs, and then Penske always comes late and wins the championship. So, and I don't know who it's going to be, but you would think for that championship 4 in Phoenix, probably, I mean, you could bet there'll be a Hendrick car, there'll be a Gibbs car, right? There'll probably be a Penske car, and it'll probably be one more guy. And maybe it could be 4 different teams with 2311. Maybe Tyler Reddick gets in there, but I bet you there's at least 3 teams represented in that championship 4.
Yeah, I think you're probably right in the luck of the draw and things going wrong, but just the parity of the competition and the way all these teams that are there. To your point, what the way these guys are running, that should happen, right? Now, what would keep that from happening is bad luck, a wreck, blown tires. You know what I mean? Bad pit stop, whatever. That would keep that from happening. But the parity of those teams that are there, yeah, it's very equal. I mean, it's just as equal. Golly, it's just as equal as it's ever been, if not more equal than it's ever been in my time in the sport. Other than Kyle Larson whipping everybody's ass the other night, it's been the parity. It's good. It's good right now, and you're exactly right about that.
All right. From good to what's ticking off Rick Mast.
Oh
Anything
man,
lately? It's been a
you
while
know,
since we did this.
golly, things are going so well, Charlie. It's just that I think as I'm getting older, I'm trying not to let stuff make me mad as much as it used to, and consequently, here we are on a Monday morning after Bristol, and I'm just as happy as pig in shit, man. I mean, I don't know what pig in poop. I'm sorry. Are we supposed to cuss on this show? What
You're
what is
allowed
it?
to.
What is the allowable thing that we're supposed to do or not allowed? Tell me what we're supposed to do and not do, Charlie, because I don't
Okay.
know. Now
This
I know
is
Kenny Wallace, right?
right.
And he really, he really, really tones it down big time, right? So I don't know where I'm supposed to be at.
So here's the deal. I'm still not sure. Specifically YouTube, everybody has different guidelines. Podcast, YouTube. For us, we're more focused on YouTube. Now, I don't even know this is true. I read somewhere or heard somewhere back in the day that you're not supposed to curse in the first 30 seconds of the video. And the reason for that is there are ads that play right before the video starts. And then so the idea is these advertisers wouldn't want to be associated with curse words right out of the gate. So again, I don't know that this is true, but I usually bleep if there's an F bomb or a bad one. I usually bleep it 30 seconds into the show. I don't bleep anything usually later on down the road. There was one video Kenny did where he actually did the video. The whole point of it was about the F word. And I sent it through there, and YouTube came back and said limited ad suitability, meaning through their AI technology, they figured out there was too many F words. So I went back and bleeped them. So that's a long way of saying I don't know. I know this for titles, you're not supposed to curse in the title. So sometimes I'll do like if you're saying shit, I'll say SH star T. So I don't know. I don't know that it's an exact science. So you can say whatever you want.
Yeah, you don't know. My mentor, this you and Kenny Wallace, and I'm listening to it. I'm like, man, I don't know. After I cuss, I'm like, should I have cussed? Well, it doesn't make any difference, right? So, but what were we talking about to get on? Oh, we're talking about what pisses Rick off. I really don't have anything, man. it's still the same old thing. People driving in the left lane. I hate that.
Hmm.
In fact, in Virginia, we've got these message boards all over the state, and about every 4 days they put up a big sign on the message boards: drive in the left lane, get a ticket. Left lane's for passing, right lane's for driving. Right? We get all that stuff. So that's the main thing gets me. But in the racing world, everything's just so good. There's nothing went on wrong. It's just it's a lovely day in the neighborhood.
It is. It's beautiful. Especially it's always good on a Monday to start the
It
week
is.
off. You shouldn't be ticked off, right?
No,
You should have had
no.
a relaxing weekend and getting ready for a productive week now. How about story time? Rick Mass story time. Anything you got it can be Bristol, you got Kansas coming up. It can be anything though, Rick.
Bristol. I think about somebody. I was watching the Dale Jr. download last week, right? And somebody brought up to Dale on the download. A fan brought up the Watkins Glen, the infamous Watkins Glen party that we had talked about on this show before. And Dale was talking about this group of drivers that came into his busted into his motorhome and sitting there talking to him. And Terry Labonte told him, Dale, you need to start wearing the Hans device. And I thought it was fun, from Dale's perspective. He said, I never spoke to Terry Labonte in my life. I never said one word to Terry Labonte. And all of a sudden, here he's sitting in my motorhome telling me that I got to start wearing a Hans device. And he's like, yeah, okay, that's what I'll do then, right? And it was cool because he's talking about all these guys in the way, all these drivers that came in, and it was me, DJ, Dale Jarrett, Bobby Labonte, Terry Labonte, Ken Schrader. Uh, we were all in there, and he was talking about the guys in the waiting years of their career uh, coming into his motorhome and telling him that he needs to start wearing a Hans device, right? And he's like, well, these guys, I don't know who they are. I mean, I've never talked to any of them much or whatever, but if that's what they're telling me I need to do, that's what I'm going to do, right? So anyhow, and he was talking about Sterling Marlin, and I called Dale. I said, Dale, I said, yeah. He said, a couple of things to that story. Number one, it wasn't Sterling, it was me. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. That's right, that's right. And I said, the other part of that story is that you probably don't remember this, but we had an 8 o'clock practice that morning. So we're like, whatever time our deal broke up, I don't know what time of the morning it was. It was late night or early morning. And we had an 8 o'clock practice the next morning. I pull down on pit road in my race car, and I pull right up beside the Budweiser car, which is Dale Jr. I pull up to the right side of him. We're sitting there. I'm on the right side of him, waiting to go out on the racetrack. All of a sudden, he goes, rada, 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 rada. He hits the accelerator like 4 times or 5 times, real hard, and the exhaust comes out right at my door, right. So all that noise and exhaust, he's throwing right on me hard as he can. And I look over, man, and I'm like, man, he gets the bird. I give him the bird. Don't do that crap, man. He knew what he was doing. I mean, we were, I think, I think all 5 drivers, maybe I might be wrong. But I know some of us were. We were the slowest on the speed chart that morning on that 8 o'clock practice, right? But anyhow, when I gave him the bird, he laughed and did it again, right? So, but I thought it was neat. We've talked about that story many times. A lot of guys have, but I thought it was neat. His take was, these guys, these veterans, these guys that I look up to, right, all came to my motorhome, and Terry told me to start wearing a Hans device. And I remember DJ added to it. He said, "Man, you're the future of our sport. You are the future of our sport. You're going to be the name of our sport to carry our sport for a lot of years to come. And we need you to be here. This Hans device has already proven to save 3 or 4 guys' lives. At that point, it had saved people, right? And we need you to be here, so you need to start wearing that." And just that quick, because of who said it to him, he's like, all right, Dale Jr. All right, that's what I'm gonna
Yep.
do. I'm gonna wear the Hans device, and probably has saved him. It probably has saved. I know it saved a lot of guys, dude. And man, I remember the first time I put a Hans on. We were at Homestead, Florida, And I put the Hans on. I went out. I ran 3 or 4 practice laps. I come in. They jack the car up, and you got to understand when you practice, you come in those days. You come in, the guys grab the race car. You're hollering. You're talking to the crew chief and or engineer. You're looking around. The guys are changing springs, shocks, whatever. You're in the car. You're looking here and looking there. You're barking, talking, yapping. With the Hans device, you're sitting here like this, right? And all this stuff's going on, and I can't move my head, right? Either way. And I'm like, I'm getting frustrated, right? Just being 40 years, 30 years in a race car, doing it one way, and all of a sudden you can't move your head. I remember thinking, when this practice is over, I'm taking this stupid damn thing off, right? We go out there, Charlie. I run 2 laps, go by the start finish line. I go into turn one on the second lap, the right front tire blows, right? And if you've raced long enough, you know the angle of attack, you know the speed, you know what kind of hit's coming. And this was one of those deals like, uh-oh, this, I don't know if I'm going to survive this, right? It was one of those, and race car drivers, y'all know what I'm talking about here, right? Well, that thing went into that wall, and it hit so friggin' hard. And I remember when it hit, everything grabbed. When it bounced off the wall and stopped, I remember I'm like, damn, I'm not hurt. What's the deal? And my procedure that I would go through, I think we've talked about it. When I'd take hard licks or hard wrecks, once it stopped, if my head was down, I would kind of wiggle both of my toes on my feet and try to see them. And if they worked, then I would kind of look up and try to work both hands, right? And if they worked, I'm like, okay, then we'd start getting ready to get out of the race car. But that thing hit so hard, Charlie. I'm telling you, it seemed like when I got out of the car, Mike Helton, and I forget if it's Gary Nelson. Anyhow, they were in the tower. They had come out of the tower, come down to the racetrack, and were there with me at the race car when I getting out of the race car. They thought they had another fatality.
Oh
I
man.
mean, Mike really felt like, it was one of those deals. In the car, honestly, the right front tire up into the dash, like it was a tremendous, terrible lift. There's no doubt, if I hadn't had the Hans device on, I wouldn't have survived that. It's just, anyhow, I remember telling Mike, Gary, I said, guys, I said, this is the aggravating thing. I was getting ready to take it off. I said, let me tell you something. I said, you need to not ever let anybody get in one of these race cars ever again unless they're wearing this Oz device. Because I'm telling you, it just saved my life, I think, or saved me from big time injury, right? And from that moment forward, I was sold on the Hans device. And then watching guys' impacts and seeing what happened, I'm like, man, this deal has saved a lot of lives. I mean, it truly has. That and the softball, goodness gracious. But anyhow, back to Dale Jr. I thought that was a neat take. That was a neat take for me, for him to look at it that way, and that's why Dale's so popular today. I mean, he understands the history of our sport. I mean, you watch any of his stuff; he's always done this crap. He's always had older people on, older drivers, always looking back at the stories and what got him to where we're at now. And that adds to his popularity, man. And I'm happy for him.
Yeah, and that was very evident Friday. That was pretty cool that that night became the Xfinity race all about Dale Earnhardt Jr. And you know what? I think that's cool once a year because look, you need reasons, especially for casual fans, to watch the Xfinity race. And for one race a year to kind of be the Dale Earnhardt Jr. show, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and gosh, that show, we talk about these guys. Oh, Charlie. When I came along, you're from when I was 16, 15, first time in a race car, all up through the day I retired. When you would move up a division or move up a class, you had these heroes or guys that you had to look up to, or you looked up to, and you had to outrun. If you're going to advance, you had to outrun them, and you had to go on, right? And but each step along the way, I was taught. I was taught lessons. I was taught what it really meant to get in a fight, what it really meant to, if you're going to fight, okay, you're going to fight, but here's the ramifications, right? That's when we learn it's much easier to talk about it, drink a beer than fight. But anyhow, you learn, especially when you get into NASCAR and you get into Xfinity or Busch, and then you get into Cup, you learn from the guys that's been there way before you how you act, how you react, how you drive, how you race. You learn all that. And how you conduct yourselves. And one of the frustrating parts for some of the people over the last few years, the Tony Stewarts, right? The Martin Truexes to some degree, the Mark Martins, these guys, as the new guys came along, this the art has changed. The art of driving has changed, right? And for whatever reasons, it seems like we don't have anybody teaching or showing the guys, the newer guys, the way, right? Whether it's, I don't know, it's just naturally happened. I don't know. But the deal with Junior in the Xfinity race is okay, we raced. Here we are. We got a big cooler. We're out on pit road. Here's a bunch of ice, and here's a big cooler of beer, a big tub of beer. We're on pit road, man. We're laughing, it talking about the racing. That's what was so fun in the older days, right? Especially the Busch series and late models and the guys do it late model stock, the car store, all these guys. They get out of the race car, man, they sit back and drink beer, and unless two guys are fighting each other, it's usually sitting back and everybody's having a big time talking about the race and talking about how he should have kicked his ass and he should have outrun him and he didn't outrun him, talking about the race cars. All the drivers used to do that a lot. And as we've gone on, it's homogenized itself to where, the guys just don't do that anymore, because of media, because of time constraints, that stuff doesn't go on. And I guess it's something that the guys today are missing, and they don't know they're missing, and it's a shame because they could have a lot more fun with this if they could do stuff like that. But those days are gone; they're over with. But I did, to your point, I thought it was cool that Junior shows say, "Hey guys, look here. Here's what we can do. Right when the race is over, here's what we can do to have a little fun with this. We just raced. Let's have some more fun with this." And it kind of throws back, and I thought it was very, very cool.
Very cool. So, hey, your story earlier about the Hans device, what track was that at?
Homestead, Florida.
Homestead. Okay.
Homestead,
So
Florida.
I asked for a couple questions on YouTube, and we got a couple good ones. So let's see here. Corn Dogger 61 says, "Hi Rick, how did it feel to flip in 1991 at Talladega? Was it weird, and what can you remember from it?"
Hey, Corn Dogger. Thanks, man. That's a hell of a name, Corn Dogger.
Corn Dogger, yes.
We were coming through the trial, and I had moved down. I was racing. It was Davey Allison was in front of me, and Buddy Baker's behind me. I moved down through the trial. Well, I had a little run to try to run by Davey, and Buddy's behind me on my left rear, and he didn't move, right? And he clipped me and turned the car sideways. And in those situations, once you're up in the air, it just gets real quiet. And all of a sudden you realize that you're in the realization that, I'm in trouble here. That car, one of the things about that thing, it's a couple things happened. Somebody asked me one time, said, Rick, what were you doing when you was upside down? I said, man, I was just hanging on. What do you mean? He said, were you still driving? I said, no, I don't guess. So we'll go back and look at the tape. All four wheels when it was upside down were spinning. And at some point, they stopped. In other words, when I was upside down, at some point, I pushed the brake pedal. Whoa, baby, whoa, because all four wheels stopped spinning. So I like, well, you hit the brakes upside down, like that's going to do a lot of good, right? And it hit the outside wall. I remember it hit the wall tremendously, and it slid. You're just holding on, hoping nobody hits you, hoping it doesn't take off tumbling. It finally stops. I remember when it stopped, the A post bar was all smashed down on me, and I couldn't come out the left side, but I saw light, which was the right side of the door window. And I'm like, well, that's where I need to go. But the bars were all caved in on me so tight it had me kind of wedged. So I got my gloves off and I got my helmet off. And I remember a safety worker stuck. He kind of crawled down. He's up in the car with me a little bit. He said, Rick, you all right? Yeah. Well, hold on here a little bit. We're gonna get you out of here. I said, man, you better get the hell out of my way. I'm coming out of here, right? And it was funny story to that. A year later, he came up to me. He said, Rick, I'm that guy. He said, get the hell out of the way. I said, dude, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. But anyhow, neat part of that story, Buddy Baker, I had gotten when Buddy got hurt, I drove for his car. I drove his car at Bristol and Darlington. He gave me my first shot in Winston Cup at that time, 1988, Bristol and Darlington. When they came back around, I was sitting there wrecked. Excuse me. Buddy gets on the radio with his spotter. The spotter tells me this 3 or 4 years later. Buddy gets on the radio. Is Rick out of the car? The spotter says, no, buddy. He's still in the car. Well, Buddy spends the next lap going around. upset. As the spotter says, he almost starts crying. He said, "Oh my God!" He said, "I've done killed Rick." He said, "I give that boy his first ride in this sport." He says, "I love him to death. He's a good boy. He's got that little boy son of his, his wife. Oh hell, what are we going to do? I've killed him. I don't know." Spotter says he's almost crying. Comes back around. He comes back around, and the I'm out of the car. He says, "Is that Rick out of the car?" Spotter says, "Yeah, I've been trying to tell you, buddy," but he wouldn't stop. He says, "He's okay." He said, "Yeah, he's out here walking around." Well, let me tell you something. All these little young buck drivers come in here like assholes running all over the racetrack. I ain't putting up that shit. He cut down on my ass, and I'm gonna turn his ass. He's not gonna turn down on me. I don't care who they are. They're not, blah blah blah. He went from crying and loving me, right? And you turn the switch off in 3 seconds. Now he's cussing me for he wrecked me, but it was my fault that he wrecked me, right? It was it was a weird deal, funny deal, but strange, but funny.
I like it. All right. Another good question. This one is from iRacing Aussie. This person is from Perth, Western Australia. How would peak 1994 Dale Earnhardt Sr. do in this current generation of Cup car? Would he approach the format by dominating the regular season, or would he save his best for the playoffs? What do you think?
No, it would be every lap. It wouldn't make a shit to him. Listen to me, dude. It wouldn't make any difference to him. Every lap, at every race, he's going to run it. Today's deal, today's generation, last one, it doesn't matter. Every lap, he's going to run that thing as absolutely out of control, wide open, hard as he can run it. There'd be no hold back. It never was with Dale. That wasn't his mentality. He couldn't he couldn't function with that mentality. If he tried to race with that mentality, he would not be Dale Earnhardt. It wouldn't work. So that's a very easy question to answer.
All right. Let's end on this one. A local question for you. This is
Okay.
Dubs in Virginia, 3572. Ask Rick what he thinks about a local racing family from his hometown, Tommy Bear. Is it Booper Bear?
It is.
Booper Bear and
Mhm.
Tyler Bear. Thanks.
Yeah. They live about probably 2 miles from me, the way the crow flies. That family, uh, very, very integral part of local racing scene here. When my dad built that racetrack in '67, Tommy was one of the first guys that raced, right? And he made a legacy and he started branching out and going to a lot of racetracks. He won tons of races, tons of championships. Then his son came along, Booper Bear, and Booper kind of followed in Tommy Lee. I called him Tommy Lee, but his name was Tommy. He followed in Tommy's footsteps and started winning races. Very talented. All these guys very talented, very good, winning championships, going a lot of places. He ran 2 or 3 different series and won a ton of races, ton of series. And now his son has come along, Tyler, and Tyler's just fell right in to his granddaddy and his daddy. I mean, he wins races everywhere they go. They win, right? And they're just farmers. Tommy Lee is a farmer. Got big old farm back here, and that's what they do for a living. They farm and then they race. And in fact, at Natural Bridge had the Tommy Bear Memorial Race this past weekend at Natural Bridge. This was the second year for that, and I don't know. So many people like Tommy Lee or Tommy and Booper in this Shenandoah Valley. So many great family, great race car drivers, great families, great racing families, right up and down this valley. So I'm just cherished to live here and be a part of it.
I love it. You know what? We're gonna end there anyway. And then your clock was beeping, so that's the perfect way to end the show here. A
Okay,
good local grassroots racing story. I think we covered a lot, Rick. What do you think?
that's it, baby. Okay, it doesn't get any better than this, Charlie. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you all for watching the Rick Mass Show. Please comment, like, subscribe, share the videos, share the shows, put them in your group chats, put them on social media, get the word out, and we will come back and do one again soon. See you, buddy.
See you, Charlie. Bye.